The badge said night maintenance in block letters above a photo taken while Marcus Webb was still blinking from the flash. He clipped it to the chest pocket of his gray coveralls, pulled his cart through the service entrance of Arctis Technologies at 10:47 on a Tuesday night, and took the service elevator to the 26th floor without being asked to take any particular elevator, because he had already learned which one the building supervisor preferred the cleaning staff to use. He had been on the job 11 days. Arctis occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. The company ran cloud data infrastructure for 40 million users across 14 countries, and the lobby video wall made sure every visitor understood the scale of that. Client names scrolled in silver text on a dark background. Uptime statistics ticked in real time. Marcus had stood in front of it on his first night with his cart parked behind him and read through the full list while the night desk guard watched from across the marble floor. He recognized 31 of the 42 enterprise clients on the screen. 12 of them he had worked with personally 6 years ago in a different version of his life. 4 of them were running security architecture he had designed himself under a consulting contract with a firm called Reedman Systems, which Arctis had acquired in 2019. The framework was still in use. He had checked that from the outside, carefully, before he applied for the job. He had not mentioned any of this when he was hired. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The cleaning schedule put him on the server floor every Tuesday and Friday between 11 and 2 in the morning. 14 racks of equipment, 3 data centers, 4 geographic regions. The room had dual biometric entry, thermal monitoring, and a suppression system that would flood the space with inert gas in 30 seconds. It was a well-protected room. Marcus cleaned it with the same care he applied to everything else. He mopped the non-static floor sections, wiped down the external panels with the approved cloth and solution, checked the cable management trays for anything that needed logging, and entered his completion time on the tablet by the door. He did not touch what he was not supposed to touch. What he could not stop doing was noticing. 14 years of working in rooms like this one had built a kind of attention that did not dissolve just because the context had changed. The alarm on his phone read 5:15 when he silenced it on the 3rd morning of that week, though he had been awake since 20 past 4. The apartment was a 2-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building on the city's north side, where the rent was manageable, and the elementary school 6 blocks away had a chess club that met on Thursday afternoons. The chess club had been the deciding factor when he chose the neighborhood. He lay in the gray of the room for a moment and listened. Through the wall, through the open door of the 2nd bedroom, he could hear Jade breathing, the small, even rhythm of a child entirely at rest. He waited until the sound was steady before he got up. The kitchen was narrow. He made coffee and stood at the counter with the mug between both hands, looking at the table without picking up anything on it. A permission slip for a school field trip sat unsigned in the center. He had come home at 3 in the morning and couldn't find a pen. Beside it, a chess problem that Jade had been working on for 4 days, pieces drawn on graph paper in black marker, her notations in the margins in handwriting that still leaned too far to the right. He found a pen and signed the permission slip. He looked at the chess problem. He saw the answer, which he had seen on the first day she showed it to him. He left it where it was. Nadia had been the one to notice the chess aptitude first. Jade had been 5, barely reading, playing a pieces game on the tablet, and Nadia had called Marcus in from the other room because there was something in the way their daughter was moving the pieces that was worth watching. It was not strategy yet. It was the beginning of the pattern recognition that would become strategy. Nadia had looked at Marcus with the expression she wore when something surprised and delighted her at the same time, needing him to be there for it. He thought about that expression more than he admitted to anyone. For years since the aneurysm. A Tuesday, which had given Tuesdays a particular weight for him that he had learned to carry without mentioning. He had been at work when the hospital called, at 2:18 in the afternoon. He drove there knowing and not knowing at the same time, which was the particular cruelty of that kind of drive. Jade was at daycare. He picked her up at 4 o'clock, the regular time, because the hours between 2:18 and 4 had to be filled with something, and the only thing he could think of was to keep doing the next correct thing. He gave his notice at Reedman Systems, the following week. His manager asked him to take the full bereavement leave before deciding anything. Marcus understood the intent behind the advice. He also understood, with the precision that grief sometimes delivers early on, that there was no version of his old schedule. The hours, the travel, the on-call rotations, the classified consulting work that required him to disappear for days at a time, that could coexist with what Jade was going to need. The math was not complicated. He submitted the paperwork and went home and began the slow work of learning how to be the only one there. For 2 years, he freelanced. Security assessments, systems audits, contract consulting, the kind of work that could be arranged around school pickup and chess club and the library slot on Tuesday afternoons where Jade did her reading. He had been managing just when the contracts thinned out. They thinned because he had stopped pursuing them the way they required to be pursued. And he had stopped pursuing them because Jade had first claim on his attention, and that was not a claim he was prepared to argue with. The Arctis posting came through a general maintenance staffing board 8 months later. Night shift, Monday through Friday, 11 to 3. He read the address and sat with it for a moment because he knew the building. He had been inside it 7 years ago for an initial security consultation, back when Reedman Systems was first contracted to build Arctis's foundational infrastructure. He had spent 11 weeks on that project. The framework that came out of it was the most complete piece of security architecture he had ever designed, and it had been published in a preprint under his initials, M.W., which was a habit from his earlier work that he had never entirely dropped. He applied for the job because the hours fit around Jade's school day. He got it because he showed up on time to the interview and did not cause problems, which was, he had come to understand, the full threshold of what was required of a person in a coverall with a mop cart. Jade appeared in the doorway at 7:10 in her blue pajamas with the fraying cuffs, her hair pressed flat on one side, carrying Fox. Fox was a small stuffed animal of genuinely ambiguous species that Nadia's mother had sent when Jade was 2, and which Jade had named after a 3-day deliberation process. Fox had one ear more worn than the other from being held the same way every night for 6 years. She crossed the kitchen and wrapped both arms around her father's leg. No words. It was the morning check, a confirmation that the world was correctly arranged, and then she went to the table and sat down in front of her chess problem. "Did you figure out?" Marcus asked. She studied the board without looking up. "Almost." He put bread in the toaster. He did not offer the answer. After a moment, she said, "The rook goes to e4, and then the queen's trapped." "That's it." "Yes." She looked up. "You knew that on day 1. You needed to find it." She held him in her gaze for a moment. The particular assessment she applied to situations she was deciding whether to be annoyed by. Then she wrote the move in the margin. He watched her, her face bent over the graph paper, and thought about Nadia. Not with the specific weight of the early years, but with something softer now. The way you think about someone when you can see them in the child sitting at your table. He put the toast in front of her. She ate it and told him her class was going to a natural history museum for the field trip, and that she planned to spend the entire time in the geology section, which she felt was undervalued in museums generally. Marcus said he agreed. She seemed satisfied by this and went to get dressed. He dropped her at school, drove back across the city, and slept until 10. Vanessa Holt arrived at Arctis at 7:04 that Wednesday morning with her laptop bag over one shoulder and coffee from the lobby of her building 3 blocks away, because a machine on the executive floor produced something that required too much imagination to call coffee, and she had stopped pretending otherwise. Her assistant, Daniel, fell in beside her at the elevator with the morning summary already open on his tablet. Board presentation at 2. A gap in the latency data for the Singapore node. The security patch cycle running 2 days behind schedule. She listened the way she listened to everything, without interrupting, eyes tracking the elevator numbers, attention fully present the way it was when a decision might be required. She made 3 decisions before the doors opened on the 29th floor, none of which Daniel would learn about until he received the follow-up instructions later in the morning. She had built Arctis over 11 years. She had started with a regional data storage company running at 30% capacity and had made it into what it was now through a specific sequence of choices about which clients mattered, which partnerships to refuse, and which technical capabilities were worth building internally. Most of those choices had been right. The ones that hadn't had been corrected, and she did not revisit them. What she was not, and had never particularly been, was attentive to the people who maintained the building around her. The cleaning staff registered the way the ventilation system registered, as a background condition, present when functioning correctly, worth noting only when something went wrong. She passed Marcus for the first time in a corridor on the 28th floor at 11:52 p.m., 3 weeks in his time at Arctis. She was carrying her laptop and a printed infrastructure report, which meant she had come to the server floor to check something herself rather than wait for the morning summary. She walked past his cart without slowing and continued toward the biometric door at the end of the corridor. At the door, she stopped. She turned and looked back at him. "You're in the wrong section," she said. "Server floor cleaning doesn't run until 11. Her watch said 11:54. The sign-in tablet on the wall beside her, 2 feet to her left, showed Marcus's badge entry logged at 11:01 p.m. "I started at 11, he said. She looked at the tablet. She looked at the time. Something in her expression adjusted. Not quite a correction, more like a drawer being closed on information that did not require further handling. "Stay clear of the A-row racks," she said. "Maintenance ran this afternoon." She pressed her palm to the reader and went in. Marcus stood in the corridor with his cart. He moved to the next section and continued working. He had been corrected incorrectly by the CEO of the company he was cleaning, in a corridor where no one else was present to see it. She had not waited for a response. He had not offered one. There was a calculation he had learned to make early in this job, and in the job before it, and in the version of his life where he had gone from a classified government office to the private sector and back, about which corrections were worth the cost of addressing and which ones simply needed to be absorbed and moved past. He logged his completion time at 1:51 a.m., rode the service elevator to the lobby, and drove home in the Honda, which started on the second try. He set his alarm for 5:15. Jade was going to need breakfast at 7. He would be there for it. That was the part of the day that mattered. The second time Vanessa Holt spoke to Marcus, she had an audience. It was a Thursday morning, 9:40, and Marcus had come in on a day shift call because Garrett, the building supervisor, was short-staffed and needed someone to handle a spill on the 28th floor before the 10 a.m. technical review. Marcus had agreed because Garrett had always been decent with him, and because the call came in at 8:15 when Jade was already at school and his morning was open. He was in the corridor with the cart when the elevator opened and Vanessa walked out with 3 people behind her, 2 men in suits and a woman carrying a presentation folder. They were in the middle of a conversation. Vanessa was talking. Marcus pulled the cart to the wall to give them space. She looked at him, not the way she had looked at the tablet in the corridor 2 weeks ago. This was a public look, calibrated for the people around her. "Is this floor scheduled for maintenance right now?" she asked. The question was addressed to the air between them, the tone of someone making a point to a room rather than asking a genuine question. "Supervisor called it in this morning," Marcus said. "There was a spill near the east stairwell." She looked at the cart. She looked at him. She looked back at the group. "Let's use the north conference room," she said to them. "This corridor is occupied." She walked past without waiting. The 2 suited men followed her without looking at Marcus. The woman with the folder glanced at him as she passed. A quick look, neutral, the kind that apologized for something without saying what. Marcus moved the cart 3 feet to the right and finished mopping the section. He told himself it was nothing. He had been told things were nothing by people with more authority than Vanessa Holt, and in those cases the stakes had been considerably higher. He had learned a long time ago that the size of a dismissal was not determined by the person doing the dismissing. That night, a Friday, he was back on the server floor at 11. It was during the second hour of his shift, somewhere around 12:40, that he noticed the LED pattern on Rack 7 of the A-row. Rack 7 was a primary authentication server, the system that verified credentials for every enterprise client session running through the Arctis infrastructure. Marcus was wiping down the external housing of Rack 6 when the pattern registered. The sequence was wrong. The lights were cycling through a fault-handling loop, but the specific combination, amber, amber, white, pause, amber, was not a standard Arctis error code. It was something else. When he had designed the security framework for the Readman contract, he had built a set of visual fault indicators into the authentication layer. not standard indicators. Indicators that would only appear in response to a very specific set of conditions. Unauthorized persistent token generation. Someone creating a backdoor key that would survive a full session reset. He had documented these indicators in a classified technical addendum that was supposed to have been shared with Arctis's security team when Reedman was acquired. He had assumed it had been. He stood in front of Rack 7 for a long moment. The pattern cycled twice more. Amber, amber, white pause, amber. He took out his phone and photographed the rack. He logged his shift completion at 1:58 a.m. And on his way out, he stopped at the security desk in the lobby and told the night officer that Rack 7 on the server floor was showing an anomalous LED sequence and that the technical team might want to look at it before the morning cycle. The officer wrote it in the log. Whether anyone read the log before Monday was not something Marcus could control. That Saturday morning, Jade beat him at chess for the first time. She did not announce it as a victory. She sat across from him at the kitchen table with the board between them, studied the position for a long time after his last move, and then moved her bishop to a square he had not accounted for. He looked at the board. He looked at the bishop. He played out the next 4 moves in his head and understood that they were done. "That's the game," he said. She looked at the board to confirm it herself, which he respected. When she was sure, she looked at him. "You left your back rank open," she said. She was not gloating. She was explaining it so he would understand what had happened. This was exactly the way Nadia had delivered information she found important. "I did," he said. "You've been tired," she said. He looked at her. She was 8 years old, and she was right. He had been working nights and sleeping in broken pieces and carrying the weight of something he'd seen in a server room at 12:40 a.m. that he was not certain anyone had looked at yet. "Rematch tomorrow?" he asked. She was already resetting the pieces. "Yes," she said, "but sleep first." He laughed. It was a short sound, the kind that came out before he decided to let it. By Monday morning, Arctis's security team knew there was a problem. By Monday afternoon, they knew it was serious. By Monday evening, they knew they could not find the source. The breach had been active for at least 72 hours. 40 million user accounts. 14 enterprise clients with contracts requiring breach notification within 24 hours of discovery. The authentication log showed something generating persistent session tokens outside the normal credential cycle. But the code responsible for it was not in any location the security team thought to look. It was buried in a layer of the system that predated Arctis's own engineering records, in a framework Reedman Systems had built during the acquisition, a framework the Arctis team had inherited and integrated without rebuilding from the ground up, because rebuilding it would have cost 14 months and $3 million, and the previous CISO had signed off on the inherited architecture as sound. The previous CISO had never read the classified technical addendum. Marcus arrived for his Tuesday shift at 11 and found the 28th floor locked. A security officer he had not seen before was stationed at the elevator landing. Service access was suspended until further notice. Marcus showed his badge. The officer told him to check with the supervisor in the morning. He went back down to the lobby. Garrett was at the facilities desk looking like a man who had been on the phone for 3 hours. "What's on 28?" Marcus asked. Garrett shook his head. "Something with the servers. They've had their security people up there all day, and they brought in an outside consultant this afternoon." He paused. "Go home. I'll put you on tomorrow's secondary list." Marcus sat in his car in the parking garage for a few minutes. He thought about the LED pattern on Rack 7. He thought about the log entry he had left with the night officer on Friday and whether anyone had read it. He thought about the classified addendum and whether it had ever made it into Arctis's documentation library when Reedman was acquired. He drove home. He made dinner. He listened to Jade describe a disagreement she'd had with a boy at chess club over whether a draw should be offered before or after the time control. He gave her his honest assessment of the situation, which she agreed with. He put her to bed. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time in the low kitchen light. He did not sleep well. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The emergency board meeting was called for Wednesday at 8 a.m. Marcus knew nothing about it, when he arrived at the building at 10:30 to check in with Garrett about rescheduled shifts. He found the lobby fuller than he had ever seen it at that hour. Two men from what looked like a law firm, a woman in a gray suit he did not recognize, and near the elevator bank, a face he had not expected to see. Dr. Sarah Chun. She was standing with a laptop bag over one shoulder and a laminated visitor badge clipped to her lapel, talking to a man in an Arctis security polo. She was 41 now, a few more gray threads in her hair than the last time Marcus had seen her, which had been in a conference room at Reedman Systems 8 years ago, when she had reviewed his framework documentation and told him it was the cleanest authentication architecture she had read in a decade. She had been brought in as the outside consultant. She had not seen him yet. He considered the probability that she would recognize him in coveralls with a maintenance badge and decided it was low enough that he did not need to resolve the question right now. He found Garrett. Garrett told him the floor was still locked and the situation had escalated overnight, and he should not count on working today. Marcus was in the lobby, about to leave, when the elevator opened and Vanessa stepped out. She was moving fast, her phone to her ear, her board liaison 2 steps behind her. She was talking to someone about notification timelines and legal exposure, and the word 40 million had a specific weight each time she said it. She ended the call at the front desk. She looked up and registered Marcus in his coveralls in the same way and for the same duration that she registered the lobby plan arrangement. Then she stopped. Why is maintenance staff in the lobby? She was not asking Marcus. She was asking the air. Garrett. Her eyes had found the building's supervisor near the desk. He's checking in about rescheduled. Clear the lobby of non-essential personnel. She turned away. I need the 28th floor access log from Friday night on my desk in 10 minutes. Marcus said, I left a note on Friday. She stopped. She turned. The movement was slow, the turn of someone who has decided to address something they expected to be able to ignore. I'm sorry. Friday night, end of my shift. I told the night security officer that rack 7 on the server floor was showing an anomalous LED sequence. He logged it. There was a silence. Her board liaison had lowered his phone. The woman in the gray suit had turned. Garrett was very still behind the desk. An anomalous LED sequence, Vanessa said. The words were careful and flat, the tone of a person deciding how to categorize something before responding to it. Amber, amber, white, pause, amber. It cycled at least 4 times while I was on the floor. It's a non-standard indicator in the authentication layer. She looked at him, at his badge, at the car Garrett had left parked by the desk. The authentication layer, she said. The Reedman framework your infrastructure runs on has visual fault indicators built into the primary authentication servers. They're not documented in any standard Arctis technical guide. They were in a classified addendum that was supposed to transfer with the acquisition. The lobby was completely silent. I need to ask you to step outside, she said. The words were quiet and controlled. This is not an appropriate conversation for Vanessa. Dr. Sarah Chun had come off the elevator. She had her laptop bag over her shoulder and her visitor badge still on, and she was looking at Marcus with an expression that had been calibrated for 11 seconds of elevator travel into something very careful and very still. She looked at him. She looked at the badge that said night maintenance. She looked at his face. Marcus, she said. Vanessa looked at Sarah. You know this person? Sarah did not answer immediately. She was still looking at Marcus with the specific attention of someone running a rapid internal review of everything they knew and reorganizing it around a new piece of information. I know exactly who this person is, she said. She turned to Vanessa. You need to let him into the server room. Vanessa's expression did not change, but the quality of her attention shifted in a way Marcus recognized. The shift from certainty into the first moment of doubt. The security team has been on that floor for 36 hours, Vanessa said. I know, Sarah said. Let him in. On the 28th floor, the server room was cold and loud with the concentrated sound of 14 racks running at full capacity. 3 members of Arctis's security team were at a workstation in the monitoring alcove. They looked up when Marcus walked in behind Sarah and Vanessa, and one of them, the senior analyst, opened his mouth in a way that suggested he was about to explain that this area was restricted. Sarah said, Give him a terminal. The analyst looked at Vanessa. Vanessa gave a single short nod that seemed to cost her something. Marcus sat down. He did not ask what they had tried. He navigated to the authentication event log and looked at 3 days of data. He found the pattern inside 4 minutes, not in the active session records, where the security team had been looking, but in the error-handling subroutine for failed authentication attempts. The backdoor was written to activate only during a specific class of failed login. A credential submitted with correct formatting, but an expired certificate. Every such failure was generating a persistent token and writing it to a dormant memory address that sat outside the active monitoring window. The dormant address was a design artifact of his own framework, a buffer zone he had built in to absorb overflow during high-traffic authentication cycles. He had documented it in the classified addendum as a potential vulnerability that required a specific mitigation patch. The mitigation patch had never been applied because the addendum had never made it into Arctis's records. He wrote 4 lines of code to disable the token generation. He ran a search of the dormant address and found 612 persistent tokens generated over the past 96 hours. He flagged every session currently running against those tokens for immediate forced logout. He documented each step in plain language in a secondary window as he went. The whole process took 11 minutes. He pushed back from the terminal and stood. The server room was quiet except for the racks. The breach entry point is documented in the secondary window, he said. The token generation is stopped. The flag sessions will need individual forensic review before any can be reinstated. He paused. The dormant address I used as the buffer zone in the original framework should be closed out permanently. I can write the patch specifications tonight. No one spoke. Vanessa was standing at the edge of the monitoring alcove. She had been there since the 4-minute mark, when Marcus had identified the location of the problem, and she had understood, from the way the security team reacted, that it was the correct location. The location they had spent 36 hours failing to find. She was looking at him with an expression that had shed every layer it normally carried. Not softened exactly. Opened. The expression of a person whose working model of a situation has been replaced by the actual situation, and who is still in the first moments of understanding the distance between the two. You designed this system, she said. The server room hummed around them. Yes, Marcus said. Sarah was at the workstation reviewing his documentation. She did not look up when she spoke, but her voice was clear in the quiet room. The M.W. framework, published as a preprint in 2018. There were 14 authors cited in the acknowledgments, 3 defense contract references, and 1 name in the abstract listed as principal architect. She looked up then at Vanessa. The name was abbreviated. Marcus Webb. Vanessa looked at Marcus. She looked at his badge, at the gray coveralls, the worn boots, the maintenance cart still parked in the corridor visible through the glass wall of the server room. She said nothing. The senior security analyst, who had been watching the whole exchange with the expression of a man rapidly recalculating several professional assumptions, turned to his screen and began running the flag session review without being asked. Marcus picked up his phone from the terminal desk. He needed to be at the school at 3:30. He had time. Garrett called Marcus at 7:48 the next morning to tell him his access badge had been deactivated. Not because he was being let go, because HR needed to issue him a different one. He sat with that for a moment at the kitchen table, coffee between his hands, Jade across from him eating toast. He told Garrett he would come in at 10. He hung up and looked at his daughter. Good news or bad news, Face? She asked. Neither, he said. Just news. She studied him. Okay, she said, and went back to her toast. The new badge said consultant, technical advisory in the same block letters. Different color. Same photograph. Same mid-blink expression. He clipped it to his shirt pocket and took the main elevator for the first time. The security team lead, a man named Flores, shook his hand on the 28th floor and spent 40 minutes walking through Marcus's patch specifications with the focus of someone making up for lost time. He asked good questions. Marcus answered them without decoration. By noon, they had a remediation timeline and a plan for closing the dormant address permanently, and Flores had sent the documentation to the enterprise clients before Marcus had made it back to the elevator. Vanessa found him in the corridor. She was alone, which told him something. She did not have her phone in her hand, which told him more. "Do you have 10 minutes?" she asked. He did. She took him not to a conference room, but to a small office at the end of the executive corridor, the kind that had a window and a chair and the particular quiet of a room used for things that were not meant to be overheard. She sat across from him and looked at him the way she had in the server room the day before, without the professional scaffolding, without the audience, without anything between the question and the person she was asking it to. "How long have you been cleaning this building?" she asked. 11 weeks. She absorbed that. And before the maintenance work? Freelance consulting. Before that, Reedman Systems. Before that, 6 years in the Federal Cybersecurity Division. He paused. "I left Reedman when my wife died. I needed hours that fit around my daughter." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the city moved through its ordinary Wednesday. "How old is she?" 8. "She beat me at chess last Saturday for the first time." Something shifted in Vanessa's face. Not a performance of warmth, the actual thing, arriving before she decided to let it. "I looked at the night security log from Friday," she said. "Your note was there. The officer logged it at 1:59 a.m. She stopped. "No one read it before Monday morning." "I know. If someone had read it Friday night, 72 hours less of exposure," Marcus said. "Probably no board meeting. Possibly no outside consultant fee." He said it without edge. It was just the arithmetic. She looked at her hands, then back at him. "I told you to clear the lobby. In front of my board." "You did. And 2 weeks before that I suggested you had the wrong floor at midnight when your login was on the tablet next to me." "Yes." She held his gaze. "I'm sorry. Both times. For the way I spoke to you, and for what it assumed." He received it the way it deserved to be received. As something real, not a transaction. He did not tell her it was fine, because it had not been fine, and she had not asked him to say so. "I appreciate that," he said. She nodded once. Then she said, "I'd like to offer you a position. Not the maintenance contract." She named a title, Director of Infrastructure Security, and a salary that was specific and fair and considerably more than he had made at Reedman. Standard hours. A team of 4 to start, with budget to grow. Full patent co-credit on any proprietary security developments produced during the role. Because Sarah had spent 20 minutes on the phone with Vanessa the evening before explaining, with characteristic precision, exactly what Marcus had built and what it was worth. He listened to all of it. He did not agree immediately. He asked 2 questions, whether the role required travel and whether his schedule had flexibility around 3:30 on school days. And her answers to both were direct and unhedged. "I'll need a few days," he said. "Of course." She stood when he did. At the door she said, "The note you left Friday night. The officer who took it." She paused. "I've already spoken to him. That process is changing." He looked at her. "Good," he said. He picked up Jade at 3:30. She came off the school steps with her backpack and Fox tucked under one arm, and she walked to him with the particular energy of someone who had something to report. "I offered Harris a draw at move 32, and he said no," she said, "and then I won in 4 more moves." "Did you tell him before or after that you saw it coming?" She considered this. "After," she said, "but only a little bit after." He took her hand. They walked to the car. That evening he made pasta from scratch because Jade had requested it, and there was now a reason to mark the day with something that required effort. She sat on the counter the way she always did when he cooked, and she told him in careful detail about the geology unit her class had started and the specific properties of igneous rock, which she felt were underappreciated. He listened to all of it, every word. Later, after she was asleep, he stood at the kitchen table and looked at the space where the overdue bills had lived for the better part of a year. The table was clear. He had paid them 10 days ago, from the first consulting payment Arctis had processed when Garrett reclassified his work order. He thought about Nadia, not with the weight of the early years, but with something quieter now. The way you think about someone when you understand they are still present in all the things they shaped. He picked up Fox from the edge of the table, where Jade had left the stuffed animal after dinner, and set it upright against the sugar canister. Fox regarded the kitchen with the dignified composure of someone who had seen everything and found most of it acceptable. Marcus turned off the kitchen light. "You want to check on Jade?" She was asleep with one arm above the blanket and her hair sideways on the pillow, breathing with the complete ease of a child who did not know she had anything to worry about. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he went to bed. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.